Brendan Gleeson. Brendan, thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks a million for coming around. It's great.
Yeah, no, for people who know you and know you well, they'll know you've kind of long been associated with a hospice, kind of born of personal experience in your family. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, both my folks, within 2.5, 3 years of each other, passed away and spent their last time in St. Francis Hospice in Raheny, and it was just such a massive gift to us and to them, the kind of sensitivity and care and professionalism that was brought to bear. It was very beautiful, to be honest, and it allowed the whole framing of their lives to be so much more easy to accommodate and to get on with, in terms of grieving. It just felt that they had been sent on their journey with just such care, that I was delighted to become involved in just trying to maintain this movement, because it's very life affirming in an ironic kind of a way.
Yeah, maybe it's kind of it's the weight of kind of thinking about our own mortality, but it's something maybe people don't put an awful lot of thought into
they do.
Until
they put a lot of
face
thought into avoiding it.
But there you are. Yeah.
No. But you do, like, why would you entertain it? Like, there's no point in thinking, oh God, I'm going to die every day. There's no point in living that way if you can avoid it. So people do relegate it to something that we'll think about that when we have to. But when you do have to think about it, then to have a whole movement of people who are just softly placing their hand on the small of your back and being there, there's nothing so pure, really. And nothing more supportive. I think, like, it really did affect the way I thought about a lot of things, because it's life evidence right in front of your eyes that kindness does exist, and the power of it, and how it makes things somehow okay.
Yeah.
There's
this maybe, and I don't know, is it an Irish thing? We think a lot of things are Irish things when actually they're universal human experiences. But this idea of, I want to be carried out of my house in a box to a degree. You know what I mean? That's where you want to pass away. So what is it about being somewhere else, being in the hospice, that makes that difference? Is it that lots of the kind of day-to-day stuff is kind of taken care of and you can just engage emotionally with your parents, or like, what is it?
No, because a lot of the care that happens now, an awful lot of it is home care. And it's something that was, like, I remember years, and you go out to see a neighbour of ours out in Harold's Cross, and she made me laugh. She said, I should have come here years ago. She was very funny, Griffin, but she was a howl. But even in there, it was, you could kind of feel something remarkable that was there in terms of the kind of positive energy that was in the place. It was very bizarre. And I was quite young. I was youngish, a young man at the time. It wasn't something that would impinge an awful lot on me, but I remember being struck by it. So it's really more about the fact that it's really about the people, and the people are involved, and there's a lot of volunteerism involved, and there's a lot of professionalism involved. So it's this absolute meeting place of people who understand and are experienced enough to know how the different phases happen, what people generally need, when they need space, when they need a little bit of a hand getting through something. The environment is consistently, like we're talking about now, a new kind of development out in St. Francis. It's going to be 24-bed unit, hopefully starting up next year, 30 million or something like that. But what it'll do is it'll allow single rooms, and the environment, they're continually working through how best the environment can be. I always remember the little piece of garden, say, when my father was there and we could kind of wheel him out for a little bit, and just that piece of solace and that little bit of greenery and the piece of it. Just constantly talk about that, and you don't really see it so much in other areas of health, unless they're private institutions somewhere that somebody can lock into for, massages or something. But the idea that a loving environment, basically, which is what it is, and it's a professionally loving environment. It's extraordinary, and they bring it to the house as well. A lot of people prefer to be in their house,
Yeah.
and as much as they can, people try to make it happen. But like, there are obviously technical problems. It's not always possible. People's independence is so kind of has been impinged so much. But the hospice will allow people. They'll allow people to find the time, whether it's at home or in the hospital itself, for acceptance of what is happening, and just communication with your loved ones to the extent where you don't feel you were cheated, and just time. And it's time and people that make the difference, not really the place. Although when they have the place, they like to make it as conducive as possible to all that stuff.
So when your dad was there, maybe, I don't know, was it the same for your mum? It was a shared room, wasn't it?
Just with my dad, I was just talking about that, and like, it wasn't in any way about a crib, because I wasn't cribbing about anything.
No, but I guess the experience is probably different.
My mum was in for a little less time, and it was all happened very quickly, and she was in a single room, and it was very intimate and all that. And Dad was there, and he was going, and then he was starting to recover, and then he was going. So at times, obviously, the shared facility, it's just a conversation. You have to speak a bit loudly because his hearing wasn't great. So you're kind of talking about
that shouty
intimate
thing,
stuff that you don't really, and then you don't want to be earwigging on the people who are next door. But some people don't mind, and then other people you can feel them trying to stay muted and keep it under the wrap. So basically, what they're doing is they're trying to make as many of the facilities they can single rooms where that's possible, and the new extension is going to kind of aid that. So I just think it's typical again. It's just they're looking at the population, the aging population is increasing all the time. So need to do something about it and build a new place. You'd kind of feel they're kind of getting ahead of the curve in the way maybe a lot of institutions are kind of looking and trying to catch up. I love that idea of forward planning. It's amazing when it works.
Yeah, to think we're going to do it in other areas of life. God forbid. But no, I think that's an interesting point, though, about even just the garden and how. And look, I understand where it comes from, where you live in a world of limited resources. But everything in other institutions, I guess, has a kind of a utilitarian purpose. If it's not conducive to the actual medicinal kind of treatment we provide,
that's the thing.
It's just let's not do it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly the area where you can't really box tick sensitivity, kindness, compassion. It's very difficult to put them down on a form and say this will keep the insurance people happy. It's crazy. It's getting in the way a lot of this stuff where people are trying to cover their backs, and understandably so. But the idea in the hospice, they overload with people. A lot of it is volunteerism, but a lot of it is staff. And it's about the idea that you put the premium on those things that are immeasurable. Immeasurable. And unless, that's why people outside of the hospice situation, a lot of people who work within it are people who have had personal experience like me. I wouldn't have come to it unless I had no choice. But it's when you see it, it's the immeasurables that I try to treasure. And I think that the whole thrust of it is about that.
Yeah,
it's about how to make yourself feel a part of a very beautiful world, and then when you're departing, that you do it in a way that kind of makes sense. It's part of the cycle of life, in some way. It leaves you with very beautiful sort of feelings of how precious life is and how precious it has been to have had somebody in your life that is now passed. It allows you to think of them in a different way because they were at peace when they went. I mean, that's immeasurable.
So I'm not to be too morbid, but then you've, as Ronan Collins would have said, a big roundy birthday next year. Does that? Are you the type of person that gives kind of cause to pause and think of mortality?
I'm delighted to address my own mortality. I've been kind of addressing it my whole life, really, and the 70 thing doesn't faze me. 60 was a bit difficult in the sense that I wasn't sure about the creaky bits. It took me about 2 or 3 years to work out about what I should expect from my own body and what I shouldn't. There were bits that were kind of falling off a little bit, and you're trying to say, well, can I expect myself to do this? Because I didn't want to give in to anything, just being, because you can turn off and get lazy, and that's such a waste. But at the same time, to be driving yourself into a position where you think you're 24 is ludicrous and not sustainable. So I found 2 or 3 that adjustment difficult, whereas I think I know now what I can expect in terms of moving forward. Touch wood, the mortality thing will hold off for another little bit, but I kind of feel I'm in bonus country anyway, and I've kind of always feel, again, as part of the framing of this thing with life and death, I think if you're capable of moving around, if you're capable of being to a certain degree independent of thought, independent of you can be actively independent in your life, it's utterly bonus country, all the time.
Yeah.
And I think the longer you keep that in your mind, I think it's extraordinary that I'm still getting away with it. I honestly do. And you kind of think of all the things, and you think about people who fell downstairs and killed themselves, and the most idiotic sort of random things that happen in life that depart people, or you lose your legs in some ludicrous sort of situation, or it becomes very dramatic and people in various situations are harmed. And I'm actually healthy. I said, I don't know how that's happened. I honestly don't. So the mortality comes. I'm not looking forward to it. I hope I can maintain my dignity to it mostly, and that I don't go weeping and falling on anybody who'll come close to me in a pathetic sort of wish for
save me,
turn back the clock. I hope. I think it'll be tough, all that stuff, but that's what again, come back to the hospice. That's what I love about the hospice, that they contextualise all that stuff, and they say, look, feeling angry is okay, feeling all those, whatever, 7 degrees of grief, whatever it is, that you go through, that rebellion, that acceptance, all that thing, all of those things are just natural. And I think once you can feel reassured that you're just part of the life cycle, you can kind of, you can get through it.
Are you conscious then of say work projects that you pick now? Again, there's a kind of a tinge of morbidity to all of these questions.
I'm going to leave you to this now and see how you pick your way through this.
Yeah. Are you conscious that there are more projects behind you than ahead of you, and that therefore maybe you are pickier about what you do?
Which means I'm in bonus country, again. I am, and it always feels very short, and I started late, so it feels even shorter, and I'm grateful for the great projects I've been part of. I do feel envious of my past sometimes, because I want to work on similar things again. It's not always possible, but definitely what you're asking is true. I've decided to limit, I'm not trying to do back-to-back things and just keep working, keep at it, so definitely I pick the projects. I can't really swing out of broadswords anymore and start running down hills and things like that with in skirts.
They can use AI to do that for
you. Exactly. Yeah. I know. So there's an element of saying, okay, you have to be realistic about what you can or can't do. But it's funny, every so often it's hard because the movie business is changing. But coming across a piece of writing that excites you, honestly, it transforms your whole way of looking at what a project is. When you're looking at something that might work, I kind of decided not to really go with those anymore, because they end up being what they started out as usually.
Okay.
So it's really when you get exciting work, it doesn't matter what age you are. It really doesn't.
So when you say it's changing, in what way?
Well, they don't, something like The Banshees was a great story. And it was like so mischievous, and at the same time, there was a ludicrously mythological kind of aspect to the whole thing. But essentially, it was a story about 2 friends falling out. And those kind of small stories that can contain such, everything, profundity, that just all human life is in it.
Yeah,
are more difficult to get on in a cinema, because people are not going to the cinema to see them. They tend to watch them on their, widescreen TVs and things like that. And I think it's a pity. I hope it comes back, but because I think the communal experience of something like that is there. When it works, it really works. But it just becomes more difficult commercially for people to launch films with small stories. So the problem is, on the other side, you have event movies, and some of them are just not that interesting.
Yeah.
A lot of them are not that interesting, but they're fun to go to, whatever. But then you have the likes of Joker, which was a big event, big franchise thing, and Joaquin Phoenix walks into the middle of it, you know, or Heath Ledger before him, and takes into a level of, I think, extraordinary sort of creativity and artistic adventure. And so they're the ones you're looking to see. Well, that it is possible in the new film experience, even within these huge, broad event movies, to have great work happening.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's hard to get something as original as that, you know, as creative as that. The small stories are usually, you know, small dramatic stories. Usually that's where you find character depth. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, Brian Cox talked about it during the week. He said, and a lot of people interpret it as kind of talking about the industry, but he very pointedly said cinema has changed.
Yeah.
And that it's the kind of superhero movies have changed cinema.
They have. Well, it's just people. Like, we can't be pointing fingers and blaming anybody. The thing is that people aren't going.
Yeah.
And, you know, COVID put a lot of people off and all that stuff. Same with plays and things like that. But, like, there are lots of nice theatres around that nobody's kind of going in and filling, really. And so if people are voting with their feet, it's very hard to fight the trend. And movies cost a lot of money, and plays are difficult to stage and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, there's a lot in TV that's worth doing. And a lot more than there used to be in TV that's worth doing, which is the other thing, that there's been a big transference. I could talk for a week about how I feel what might have happened with the series and the box sets and all that kind of stuff is difficult to achieve. Like, what it should be is that you can do a novel, whereas before you could do a short story, basically.
Yeah.
When a movie has a sense of short story in it, you get it all condensed. In a long series, there's no excuse for not having a long character study. But in reality, what happens is things have to be greenlit every year. So what they need to do is make sure that the first series, if that's successful, everybody says, okay, great, we can move along. But they don't start writing the second series until they find that out. Really bugs me. So you can't actually say, I want to have the arc of the character go all this way through 6, 7 series or anything like that. It's not quite the novel. Because if you're a novelist, you can do that. You can plot what happens and how psychologically things progress. What happens a lot of the time in the TV series is that they tend to repeat the first. They want the people to be the same. They don't want the people to progress. They want, no, I liked him when he was cranky. So yeah, but he's after learning a life lesson at the end of series 1. Why can't you? Why he must change, mustn't he? And I said, no, bring it back to where he's giving out to his.
Yeah.
That's what we loved, all that bit, and it becomes nonsensical, and the writing becomes tatty, and because again, it's all this thing of chasing the audience, and when you're chasing the audience, you're on a loser. You know what I mean? The audience has to be chasing you, really.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a long discussion.
And Akatu's gone on Kneecap, folks.
Pardon?
Have you seen this Kneecap?
No, I saw it. I heard the interview on the second Captains. I really liked the guy. I said, I have to go and see the film. And just trying to get into a cinema is really hard, but I want to go and see it, yeah. I heard it's fantastic. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm looking forward to seeing it. And it kind of, I guess, on the back of like Colin Kuhn and its success a couple of years ago, it's like a lot of people, and it's hard to know until after the fact, and we'll have to see how it all plays out. But there's maybe a feeling it's like a shot in the arm for the language, that it presents it as a living one for
yeah, but
people.
You don't want to do, like, you don't want to say, oh my God, the language is saved, we had one film that worked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, I think people it's less evangelical than it used to be, and I think it's a big move. You know, it's not really about, somebody said to me, I think it was, a man called Dabbit, I think, Damon Dabbit. But anyway, I have the name wrong. But anyway, he said to me years ago, I went back after a couple of years, I went back to college and I decided to do Irish. And he said, people will ask you why you're doing Irish. And he said, to me, it's a dying language or whatever, But if your mother was dying, you wouldn't want her to die alone. That's the reason I learn Irish, because I love it. I have the access to something that's 2,000 years old, and I feel the gift of it. And while it's there, I want to be in its presence. And it was a completely different view from saying, I want to bring Irish back. I want to save it. I want to do this kind of stuff. It's saying, listen, we have something very precious here, and just open your eyes to it and your ears to it and your mouth to it. So that's became kind of a great release from the way I look at the language at the moment. And I think what's happening now is a lot of all that evangelical stuff ran its course and actually did a lot of damage. And now what's happening is fresh people are discovering what's in there.
Yeah.
And they're sort of bringing it into new areas of life. They're not trying to just make the definitive Irish film. They're trying to take, that'd be cool in Irish. You know, and Kneecap is like exactly that. It's just saying, cool in Irish, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And like that's what'll drive it forward, is that people then are saying, oh, I believe I'm missing out on something cool. It's not as if we must save this. You know what I mean? Or it's not looking back, it's kind of looking forward to take Kamala Harris's line. But it's like, it is kind of that thing. I like, Irish is remarkable in what's there. And I was afraid for it in the sense that I thought, but I think once you give people access to it, let them at it.
Yeah. Can I ask, just because we'd have been talking about it on the show, but Nell McCafferty obviously has passed away today. Like somebody who, I guess younger listeners might not appreciate the impact that her and her quite literally fellow travellers had on this country. I mean, they changed it. She was a pioneer.
She was, yeah. She was spiky enough, though.
She was.
Yeah, I remember she came the first time I met her, and she said something about, you know, are you just letting on to be a goody or something very backhanded. I just looked at her. I said, "What's your problem?" I didn't say, "What's your problem?" But I just looked at her. I said, "That's disappointing." And then she came back after, I don't know what it was. I can't remember. It might have been something for T.G. Caher or something. And she came back out and said, "Listen, I think you're brilliant, by the way." I says, "I think you're brilliant too. So that's grand." And we were, so it was just, she had this cut. Yeah. And sometimes it could be, I said, well, I stuff that. I don't care. If she's going to be like snotty about it. And then she came up and it was all grand. It wasn't what she meant at all. And like, so there was a kind of a fire, isn't it? Like an edge to her that was, sometimes a bit misplaced and sometimes a little bit of a slash hook, and then, but you need that kind of, you needed that ferocity at the time. And I think I remember at the time I did feel I hated any of that women's stuff that appeared to keep men out of it, that men were somehow the enemy and all that. I couldn't stand it. I kind of felt it was regressive. And so I would have I'd have always cocked a bit of an eye to see what she was at. But she was essentially a really good, kind person that was fighting for the things that were good and right. And it sometimes got lost in this kind of sardonic, sort of sarcastic thing she had. She was absolutely hilarious. But no, it was what a life she had, and what a life, as you say, what a contribution she's made, you know. Yeah. I only heard it this morning, like it just, it's very interesting.
She's been well remembered today across the airwaves, as she will be by people who knew her well. But listen, back to matters at hand. I said right at the outset, I tell people about how to host or get involved. It's Thursday, September 26th is the big coffee morning, Bewley's big coffee morning social for Hospice. Now you can do it on any date that suits you. It doesn't have to be that date, but that's the focal point. And if you go to hospicecoffeemorning.ie, you'll find out all the details. Or you can call 0818 995 996. So that's 0818 995 996. And if you can't host one or you can't attend one, it doesn't suit for whatever reason, anybody is free to make a donation, and they would appreciate any red cent, anything you have to spare. It could be as little as €1, and they would be delighted with it. hospicecoffeemorning.ie /donate. Brendan Gleeson, thank you very much for joining us.
Not at all. Pleasure.